Commander Lisa Martinez walked across the bridge of her ship as it moved slowly toward the giant space station. The station was new, built by the Galactic Federation for meetings between different alien species. Her ship, the New Horizon, was heading there because Earth had been asked to help solve a fight between two alien groups about trade deals. Lisa looked out the window at the massive structure ahead. The station was bigger than any city on Earth, with ships from hundreds of different worlds docked around it. Some ships looked like metal spiders with long legs. Others were shaped like diamonds that sparkled in the starlight. A few looked almost normal, but most were so strange that human eyes could barely understand what they were seeing. The year was 2387, and humans had been part of the Galactic Federation for 53 years now. It all started when Captain Andrew Cole met the first aliens near Jupiter back in 2334. The aliens were from something called the Zenthari Empire, and they had been watching Earth for a while. They decided humans were smart enough to join the big club of space-traveling species. The Federation was huge. Over 400 different alien species belonged to it, all controlled by an ancient group called the Valdris Council. The Valdris lived on a planet called Nexus Prime, which was like the capital city of the entire galaxy. They had been in charge for thousands of years, long before humans even learned how to make fire. Lisa had been to many Federation meetings before. Humans were often asked to help when other species could not agree on something. The aliens seemed to think humans were good at listening to both sides and finding solutions that made everyone happy. It was not exciting work, but it was important. At least, that is what the Federation leaders told them. The truth was different, and Lisa knew. Yet she had seen how the other species really felt about humans. The Drakesh were tall, strong warriors who looked like giant lizards walking on two legs. They called humans soft pink things, and acted like they were barely worth talking to. When a Drakesh warrior looked at a human, it was like a lion looking at a mouse. The Zeltar were even worse in their own way. They looked like living crystals that changed colors when they talked. They were very old as a species and thought they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. To them, humans were quick-lived mayflies whose opinions did not matter because humans lived such short lives compared to other species. Even the Mendari, who were supposed to be peaceful and kind, treated humans like interesting pets. They would pat humans on the head and say nice things, but they never really listened when humans spoke at meetings. The Mendari looked like tall, thin people with blue skin and big eyes, and they always smiled when they talked to humans. But their smiles never reached their eyes. Back on Earth, Admiral Jack Harrison sat in his office on Luna Station, which orbited the moon. He was looking at reports on his computer screen, and every report made him more angry. Once again, the Federation had said no to a human request to start a new colony. The reason was always the same. Humans did not have good enough technology, or humans were not strong enough to defend a colony in dangerous space. But that was not the real reason, and Harrison knew it. The real reason was that the Federation did not want humans to have good planets. While human requests were denied year after year, other species got the best worlds in the galaxy. Species that had joined the Federation after humans were given rich planets with perfect weather and valuable resources. Humans got the leftovers if they got anything at all. Dr. Helen Brooks was having her own problems at the Federation Science Institute. She had spent years working on research that could help different species have children together. Her work was groundbreaking and could change how all the species in the galaxy related to each other. But every time she tried to present her research, her Valdris supervisor would stop her. "This work is too simple for our standards," the supervisor would say. "Perhaps humans should focus on easier projects." Meanwhile, Helen watched as alien scientists with much worse research got all the funding and recognition they wanted. Their work was published in important journals while Helen's discoveries sat ignored in filing cabinets. The pattern was clear to anyone who wanted to see it. Humans were not treated as equals in the Federation. They were treated like unwanted guests, who should be grateful for any small kindness. When human ships arrived at space stations, they had to wait in line longer than everyone else. Guards searched human ships 3 times as carefully as they searched alien ships, looking for things that were never there. Human traders had to pay higher fees to dock their ships. Human diplomats were given the worst rooms at hotels and the worst seats at meetings. Human scientists were left out of important research projects. When humans complained about any of this, they were told it was just normal procedure and nothing personal. But humans had learned something important during their long history on Earth. They had learned how to be patient. For thousands of years, humans had survived ice ages, wars, diseases, and disasters that would have destroyed other species. They knew how to wait, how to endure, and how to keep going even when things seemed hopeless. So humans smiled and nodded when aliens insulted them. They filed official complaints through the proper channels, even though those complaints were always ignored. They attended boring meetings where alien officials pretended to listen to human concerns before doing exactly what they planned to do anyway. The aliens thought this meant humans were weak. They thought humans would accept any treatment as long as they were allowed to stay in the Federation. The Drakish warriors laughed about how humans never fought back. The Geltar crystals discussed how humans were too primitive to understand when they were being insulted. The Valdris leaders made jokes about human stupidity at their private dinner parties. What none of them understood was that human patience was not the same as human weakness. Humans were patient because they were survivors. They knew that sometimes the best way to win was to wait for the right moment. They knew that enemies often defeated themselves if you just gave them enough time. Lisa Martinez knew all of this as she watched her ship dock at the Federation station. She had been dealing with alien prejudice for her entire career. She had been passed over for promotions, given impossible assignments, and treated like a child by aliens who were supposed to be her partners. But she kept doing her job because someone had to represent humanity in the galaxy. As she prepared to leave her ship for another pointless meeting about another minor trade dispute, Lisa wondered how much longer humans would keep playing this game. How many more insults would they accept? How many more times would they smile and pretend everything was fine while aliens treated them like garbage? She did not know the answer to those questions. But she did know one thing for certain. Human patience was vast, but it was not unlimited. Somewhere out there, probably sooner than the aliens expected, humans were going to reach their breaking point. When that moment came, the galaxy was going to learn something that every enemy in human history had learned too late. The most dangerous opponent was not the one who attacked first. The most dangerous opponent was the one who watched, learned, and waited until the perfect moment to show their true strength. For 53 years, humans had been watching and learning. They had been studying every alien species, memorizing their weaknesses, and preparing for a day that might never come. But if that day did come, the aliens were going to discover that they had made the biggest mistake in the history of the galaxy. They had confused human patience with human weakness, and that was a mistake that civilizations did not survive. 5 years had passed since the trade meeting at the Federation station, and things had gotten much worse for humans. What started as small insults and unfair treatment had grown into something much more dangerous. A new group called the Pure Species Alliance had formed, and they were gaining power in the Federation Council every day. The Pure Species Alliance was led by the Corvan Empire, a military group that believed older alien species were naturally better than newer ones like humans. The Corvans looked like giant bears with metal claws and red eyes that glowed in the dark. They had been warriors for thousands of years and thought that fighting ability was the only thing that mattered in the galaxy. Captain Danny Ross was flying his merchant ship, the Peaceful Dawn, through Federation space when everything changed for him. The ship was carrying medical supplies to a human colony that was fighting a disease outbreak. It was a normal supply run, the kind Danny had done hundreds of times before. Danny's younger brother Pete was working in the engine room when the attack happened. The Corvan raiders came out of nowhere, firing weapons at the Peaceful Dawn without any warning. Danny tried to contact them on the radio, asking why they were attacking a peaceful medical ship, but they did not answer. The attack was brutal and one-sided. The Corvans had military ships with heavy weapons, while Danny only had a cargo hauler with basic shields. They tore through his ship like it was made of paper. 23 crew members died in the attack, including Pete, who was killed when the engine room exploded. When Danny finally managed to escape and report the attack to Federation authorities, he was shocked by their response. The Federation Security Office told him that the evidence was not clear enough to prove the Corvins had done anything wrong. Even worse, the Corvin Empire had filed their own complaint, claiming that human ships were flying through their space in a threatening way. Your ship's flight path was aggressive, the Federation officer told Danny. The officer was a Valdris with cold blue eyes and a voice like ice. The Corvins were defending themselves against what they saw as a possible attack. These things happen in space. We suggest you choose safer routes in the future. Danny stared at the officer in disbelief. They killed 23 innocent people, carrying medicine to sick colonists. How is that self-defense? The Valdris officer shrugged. Space is dangerous, Captain Ross. Perhaps humans should be more careful about where they fly their ships. On the diplomatic side of things, Ambassador, Karen White was finding her job harder every day. She had been Earth's representative to the Federation for 10 years, and she had watched as human influence got smaller and smaller. At every meeting, there were fewer seats available for human delegates. At every vote, human opinions mattered. Yes. The worst moment came when Karen tried to propose a human medical station in the Outer Rim. There was a plague killing millions of aliens on the frontier worlds, and human doctors had developed treatments that could help. But when Karen brought up the idea at the council meeting, she was immediately shot down. The Drakesh already have healing centers in that region, said the council chairman, a Valdris named High Counselor Vithran. Adding human facilities would only create confusion and competition. The motion is denied. Karen stood up at her seat. High Counselor, the Drakesh centers are overwhelmed. They can't help everyone who needs treatment. Human doctors could save lives if you would just let them help. Vethran looked at her with the kind of expression adults give to annoying children. Ambassador White, humans have been part of this federation for less than 60 years. The Drakesh have been providing medical care for over 3,000 years. I think we can trust their expertise over human enthusiasm. The other delegates laughed at Karen's expense. She sat down feeling humiliated and angry, but she knew there was nothing she could do. This was how every human proposal ended now. Things got even worse when the Federation announced something called the Species Contribution Assessment. This was a new system that ranked every species in the Federation by how much they had contributed to galactic civilization throughout history. The rankings would determine how much power each species had in government, how much resources they could claim, and what territories they could settle. When the results were announced, humans ranked 347th out of 400 species. They were placed just above some newly discovered civilizations that spent their time farming space fungus. The ranking was supposed to be based on science, but everyone knew it was really about politics. The old powerful species had made sure they stayed on top, while keeping the newer species at the bottom. Colonel Ryan Beck, who worked as Earth's military advisor to the Federation, watched as the consequences of the ranking system became clear. Human merchant ships were now being stopped and searched by Federation patrols almost every day. The searches were called random security checks, but there was nothing random about them. Human ships were targeted 10 times more often than any other species. On the human colony of New Terra, children were being bullied in schools where humans and aliens studied together. Alien children would call human kids low rankers and mayflies. When human parents complained to the teachers, they were told that children needed to learn about the natural order of galactic society. Dr. Patricia Lee had taken over Helen Brooks' research after the older scientist died of frustration and a broken heart. Patricia was studying Federation medical files when she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Several alien species, including the Corvins and the Geltar, had been secretly experimenting on human genetic material. The experiments were being done with human blood and tissue samples that were supposed to be collected for routine medical checkups. But instead of just checking for diseases, the aliens were studying human DNA to find ways to use human abilities for their own purposes. They were particularly interested in how quickly humans could adapt to new environments and how well humans could heal from injuries. Patricia realized that the aliens saw humans not as equals, or even as inferior beings, but as useful animals, to be studied and exploited. The discovery made her sick to her stomach, but she knew she had to report it to Earth's government. The final insult came when the Federation passed something called the Galactic Harmony Preservation Act. The law said that junior species like humans had to submit all their military ship designs to be approved by senior species. Any human warship had to be equipped with remote shutdown systems that Federation authorities could activate from anywhere in the galaxy. Even worse, the law required human colonies to accept cultural adjustment officers. These were aliens who would live on human worlds and make sure that humans were following proper galactic customs. The officers would have the power to arrest humans who did not show proper respect to visiting aliens. Admiral Jack Harrison called an emergency meeting of Earth's Defense Council. The message from the Federation was crystal clear. Submit completely to alien control or face economic blockades and military action. For the first time in 58 years of Federation membership, serious people were talking about leaving the Federation entirely. They want to put control devices on our ships, Harrison told the council members. They want to put alien police on our worlds. They want to treat us like criminals who can't be trusted with our own freedom. President Ellen Davis, Earth's leader, looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. What are our options, Admiral? We can submit and become slaves in everything but name, Harrison said. Or we can leave the Federation and face the consequences alone. The room was quiet for a long moment. Everyone knew what the consequences would be. Earth would be cut off from galactic trade. Human colonies would be surrounded by hostile forces. The Federation had the power to destroy human civilization if they wanted to. But Harrison saw something else in the faces around the table. He saw the same thing that had been building in humans across the galaxy for years now. He saw anger. Not the hot, quick anger that burned out fast, but the cold, deep anger that lasted forever. The kind of anger that came from years of being pushed around and humiliated by bullies who thought they were untouchable. There is another option, Harrison said quietly. We could show them what happens when you push humans too far. The aliens in the Federation had made a fundamental mistake about human nature. They thought that because humans were patient and diplomatic, they were also weak and harmless. They had forgotten that the most successful predators in nature were the ones that watched and waited before striking. For nearly 60 years, humans had been watching and waiting. They had been learning about alien weaknesses while pretending to be harmless. They had been preparing for a war they hoped would never come. But now it looked like that war was inevitable. And when it started, the galaxy was going to learn why. Patience was not weakness, but the most dangerous strength of all. The moment that changed everything started with something small. Captain Greg Walsh was flying his research ship, the Scientific Endeavor, through a part of space that most people had forgotten about. His job was to study old planets and see if they could be used for new colonies. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. Greg's ship was small and had only 37 people on it. Most of them were scientists who spent their days looking at rocks and taking pictures of empty worlds. Dr. Amy Chen was the head scientist, and she was very good at her job. She could look at a planet and tell you everything about its history, just by studying the dirt and air. The planet they found was called Kepler 442c, and it should have been beautiful. The computer record said it used to have forests and oceans, and millions of different animals. But when Greg's ship got close enough to see the surface, they found something horrible instead. The planet was dead. Not just empty, but completely destroyed. The oceans were gone, leaving behind cracked salt flats that stretched for thousands of miles. The forests had been burned away, leaving only black ash that the wind blew in endless storms. Worst of all, there were huge machines scattered across the surface, giant metal structures that looked like they had been mining the planet's core. Dr. Chen spent 3 days studying the readings from the planet's surface. What she found made her hands shake as she typed her report. The planet had not died naturally. Someone had killed it on purpose, stripping away every valuable mineral and leaving billions of native creatures to die when their world was destroyed. The mining equipment was old but still recognizable. Dr. Chen had seen similar machines before, in Federation technical manuals. The energy signatures matched Valdris technology perfectly. This was not some ancient disaster or unknown accident. The Valdris Council, The wise and noble leaders of the Federation had strip-mined this world 60 years ago and then abandoned it when the profits dried up. Captain Walsh, Dr. Chen said when she showed him her findings, this breaks every environmental protection law the Federation has. They murdered an entire planet and then covered it up. Greg stared at the data on his screen. 60 years ago, when this planet was being destroyed, the Valdris had been giving speeches about the importance of protecting natural worlds. They had been lecturing other species about environmental responsibility, while secretly committing the worst ecological crime in galactic history. We have to report this, Greg said. The galaxy needs to know what really happened here. Dr. Chen nodded and began preparing a data transmission to Earth. But before she could send it, alarms started going off all over the ship. Greg ran to the bridge and saw something that made his heart sink. A fleet of Valdris warships had appeared around them, surrounding the scientific endeavor like sharks around a wounded fish. The lead Valdris ship sent a message. Commander Zethal, a high-ranking Valdris officer with cold silver eyes, appeared on the communication screen. His voice was smooth and polite, but there was a threat hidden underneath every word. Captain Walsh, Zethal said, you have entered a classified system without proper authorization. Your crew must submit to security processing immediately. This system is not marked as classified on any Federation charts, Greg replied. We have every right to be here under standard exploration protocols. Zethal's smile was like ice. I am afraid there has been an administrative error. This system contains sensitive Federation interests that must be protected. Your crew will be transferred to our ships for debriefing. Any data you have collected must be turned over to Federation security. Greg knew what debriefing meant when the Valdris used that word. It meant having their memories erased or altered so they could never tell anyone what they had seen. Some people who went through Valdris debriefing came back different, like important parts of their personality had been cut out with a knife. We need time to prepare for transfer, Greg said, stalling for time. You have 10 minutes. Zethal replied and cut the communication. Dr. Chen worked frantically at her station, trying to get the data transmission ready. The Valdris ships were jamming most communication channels, but she found a narrow frequency that might get through. With seconds to spare, she managed to send the data about Kepler 442c to Earth, just as the Valdris boarding parties forced their way onto the ship. The transmission reached Earth just as Admiral Jack Harrison was meeting with President Ellen Davis about the Federation's latest demands. The data that Dr. Chen had sent was more than just evidence of environmental destruction. It was proof that the Federation's leadership had been lying to the galaxy for decades while committing crimes against entire worlds. But worse news came just hours later. Earth's spy network, built quietly over decades of careful work, reported that the crew of the scientific endeavor was being held in a secret Valdris facility. The official Federation statement said they were being debriefed according to standard security protocols. The truth was much darker. The humans were being subjected to invasive neural probing and genetic sampling. The Valdris were not just trying to erase their memories. They were studying human brains to learn how humans thought and reacted. 3 crew members had already died during the interrogation process, including a young engineer named Bobby Martinez, who had just gotten married before the mission. Harrison brought the news to President Davis immediately. They're torturing our people to death, he said, and they think we'll just accept it like we always do. President Davis looked at the reports on her desk. Pictures of the dead planet, records of the Valdris cover-up, medical reports about what was happening to the scientific endeavor crew. For 60 years, humans had accepted insults and discrimination because they thought it was better than war. But this was beyond insults. This was murder. Call Ambassador White, Davis said. Tell her to request an emergency session of the Federation Council. It's time to show them what we really think about their leadership. The emergency session was held 3 days later in the Great Chamber of the Federation Council on Nexus Prime. Representatives from all 400 species gathered to hear what the humans had to say. Most of them expected another boring complaint about unfair treatment that would be politely ignored like always. Ambassador Karen White walked to the center of the chamber carrying a data tablet. She had been Earth's diplomat for years, always polite and respectful even when aliens insulted her. But today was different. Today she was not here to ask for anything. She was here to make a statement. Fellow beings of the Federation, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. I stand before you today with evidence of the greatest crime in our galactic history. The chamber buzzed with confused murmurs. High Counselor Vethran, the leader of the Valdris Council, looked annoyed at the interruption to his schedule. Karen activated her tablet and began displaying the images from Kepler 4042c on the chamber's main screen. The audience saw the dead oceans, the burned forests, and the abandoned mining equipment. She showed them the energy signatures that proved Valdris involvement. She presented the timeline that showed when the destruction had happened, and who had covered it up. The Valdris Council, Karen said, her voice growing stronger with every word, has spent 60 years lecturing us about environmental responsibility while hiding the fact that they murdered an entire world for profit. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Some species began shouting in outrage at the accusations. Others demanded proof that the evidence was real. The Valdris delegation sat in stunned silence, not expecting their crimes to be exposed so publicly. High Counselor Vethran recovered first. He stood up and pointed an accusing finger at Karen. These are fabricated lies created by a desperate species that cannot accept its proper place in the galactic order, he declared. Humans have always been troublemakers who refuse to respect the wisdom of their betters. Karen smiled, and there was something cold and dangerous in that smile that made several aliens step back. Your Honor, I have not finished my presentation. She activated another file on her tablet. This one showed the secret facility where the Scientific Endeavor crew was being held. The images were horrifying. Humans strapped to medical tables while Valdris scientists performed experiments on their living brains. The bodies of the crew members who had died were clearly visible. This is what Valdris justice looks like, Karen said. Torture and murder to cover up their crimes. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species began shouting for investigations. Others demanded explanations from the Valdris. A few began backing away from the Valdris delegation as if they were diseased. But High Counselor Vethran made the mistake that changed everything. Instead of trying to explain or apologize, he let his arrogance take control. He stood up and raised his voice above the chaos. The primitive species known as humans must learn that some truths are too complex for their simple minds to comprehend, he declared. They are children playing with forces beyond their understanding. As of this moment, Earth's membership in this federation is suspended pending a full investigation into human espionage and terrorism activities. The chamber fell silent. Every being in the room understood what had just happened. The Valdris had not just dismissed the evidence of their crimes, they had declared war on humanity. The Federation leaders thought the human withdrawal was just a temper tantrum that would end in a few days. They expected desperate messages from Earth begging to be let back into the galactic community. Instead, they got something they never saw coming. Commander Jake Sullivan led the first wave of what Earth called diplomatic corrections. His fleet of 12 ships appeared simultaneously in 7 different star systems, striking Federation facilities with precision that seemed impossible. These were not the slow, bulky human cargo ships that Federation forces were used to seeing. These were sleek predators that moved through space like hunting wolves. The ships were black as night and shaped like arrows. They appeared without warning, struck their targets with devastating accuracy, and vanished before Federation forces could respond. The technology was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The ships seemed to bend space around them, appearing and disappearing as if they could step outside normal reality. Admiral Lisa Carter commanded the human fleet from her flagship, Righteous Fury. She watched her tactical display as Federation bases across the galaxy sent out panic distress calls. The humans were hitting communication centers, supply depots, and command stations with surgical precision. They were not trying to kill as many aliens as possible. They were trying to send a message. The message was simple. You have no idea who you are dealing with. The truth was finally revealed. For 60 years, Humans had deliberately used inferior ships and equipment when dealing with the Federation. While alien leaders dismissed them as technologically backward, human scientists had been developing weapons and systems that made Federation technology look like stone tools. Dr. Robert Kim had spent decades studying every Federation species while working at what aliens thought was a simple research lab. In reality, he had been mapping the weaknesses of every alien military force in the galaxy. He knew exactly how Corvin shields failed under specific energy frequencies. He had cataloged every blind spot in Drakesh sensor arrays. He understood Valdris psychology better than the Valdris understood themselves. The Battle of Proxima Station showed the galaxy what human military doctrine really looked like. The station was a massive Federation fortress that was supposed to be impossible to attack. It had shields that could stop asteroid impacts and weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The Corvin Empire had built it as a symbol of their military might. Admiral Carter's fleet approached the station head-on, which seemed like suicide to the watching Corvin defenders. But as the human ships got closer, something incredible happened. The ships began to move in perfect coordination, like they were all controlled by a single mind. They split into complex attack patterns that confused the station's targeting systems. The human ships fired weapons that the Corvins had never seen before. Instead of simple energy beams or explosive missiles, the humans used something that seemed to eat through matter itself. The station's mighty shields collapsed in minutes. Its weapon systems were disabled with pinpoint accuracy. The entire fortress was captured without killing a single defender. But the real shock came when the galaxy learned about humanity's secret allies. While Federation leaders had dismissed humans as irrelevant, humans had been quietly building relationships with oppressed species, forgotten colonies, and ignored peoples across the galaxy. The Talari had been enslaved by the Drakesh Empire for over 1,000 years. They were small furry creatures that the Drakesh used as workers in their factories and mines. Everyone thought the Talari were too weak and peaceful to ever fight back. But when human ships arrived with weapons and training, the Talari rose, in rebellion across dozens of worlds. The mining colonies in the Epsilon sector had been taxed into poverty by Federation trade policies for centuries. The miners were a mix of different species who had been abandoned by their home governments and forgotten by galactic society. But humans offered them something no one else ever had: protection and fair treatment. Within days, every mining colony in the sector declared independence under human protection. Captain Beth Morgan led the rescue mission to free the crew of the scientific endeavor. The Valdris detention facility was supposed to be secret and unbreachable, hidden in a star system that did not appear on any public charts. But human intelligence had been watching the Valdris for decades, and they knew exactly where their enemies kept their prisoners. The rescue team found horrors that shocked even experienced human soldiers. The facility contained not just the human crew but hundreds of beings from dozens of species. All of them were being subjected to terrible experiments in the name of Federation security. The Valdris had been using the facility for decades to torture anyone who threatened their power. Dr. Amy Chen was barely alive when the rescue team found her. The Valdris had been trying to extract information about human technology from her brain using machines that caused incredible pain. But she had refused to break, protecting Earth's secrets even while being tortured nearly to death. The rescue became something more than just saving the human crew. Captain Morgan's team liberated every prisoner in the facility and broadcast the evidence of Valdris crimes to the entire galaxy. The images of the torture chambers and experimental labs caused outrage across hundreds of worlds. But the most terrifying demonstration of human capability came during the war itself. Human ships seemed to appear and disappear at will, using technology that bent the laws of physics. Human soldiers fought with coordination that suggested they could read each other's minds, yet they maintained the individual creativity that made their tactics impossible to predict. The Corvin Empire, convinced they could crush the upstart humans through brute force, committed their entire military to a massive assault on the human colony of New Geneva. The Corvins sent over 1,000 warships, including their most powerful battle cruisers and their elite warrior squadrons. The battle lasted exactly 6 hours and 12 minutes. When it was over, the entire Corvin fleet was either destroyed or captured. The humans had lost only 3 ships, and those had been damaged rather than destroyed. Even more shocking, human forces had somehow managed to capture the Corvan homeworld during the same battle, using ships that had appeared there through some kind of faster-than-light travel that Federation science said was impossible. General, Mark Reynolds coordinated the liberation of 17 different worlds in a single month. Each liberation was surgical, precise, and devastating to Federation forces. The humans would arrive, disable the Federation garrison without killing anyone if possible, and then ask the local population if they wanted to join the growing human alliance. Most chose to join. After centuries of Federation oppression, the promise of equality and fair treatment was too good to refuse. The human alliance grew from dozens of worlds to hundreds almost overnight. High Counselor Vethron, watching his carefully constructed empire crumble around him, made a desperate broadcast to all remaining Federation worlds. His voice was filled with panic as he tried to rally support for a final stand against humanity. "The humans are not what we believed them to be," he declared. "They are a plague species, designed by evolution to consume and conquer everything in their path. They have been lying to us for 60 years, pretending to be weak while secretly preparing to destroy everything we have built. They must be stopped before they devour the entire galaxy." But it was too late for warnings. Across the galaxy, species that had suffered under Federation rule for millennia were looking at humanity with new eyes. If these primitive newcomers could bring the mighty Federation to its knees in a matter of months, perhaps it was time to reconsider who the real primitives were. The Geltar crystals, who had always considered themselves the most intelligent species in the galaxy, began to realize that human intelligence worked in ways they had never understood. Humans did not just think faster or remember more facts. They thought differently, seeing connections and possibilities that other species missed entirely. The Drakesh warriors, who had always believed that physical strength was the most important quality in the universe, discovered that human strength came from their ability to work together. A single human might not be able to defeat a Drakesh warrior in single combat, but humans never fought alone. They fought as groups, as communities, as entire civilizations united by common purpose. Even, the peaceful Mendari began to understand that they had completely misjudged human nature. They had thought humans were simple and emotional, driven by basic instincts rather than wisdom. But the careful planning and patient execution of humanity's military campaign showed a level of strategic thinking that impressed even the ancient Mendari philosophers. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon was never their technology or their military might. It was their patience, the infinite patience of predators who could study their prey for decades before finally deciding to hunt. For 60 years, humans had been watching and learning. They had memorized every alien weakness, cataloged every Federation failure, and prepared for a war they hoped would never come. When that war finally arrived, they were ready in ways that their enemies could never have imagined. The age of Federation dominance was ending, and the age of human leadership was about to begin. 1 year had passed since humanity's patience finally broke, and the galaxy was a completely different place. The Galactic Federation, which had ruled over 400 worlds for thousands of years, now controlled less than half of its former territory. The rest had either joined humanity's new alliance or declared independence from galactic government entirely. President Alice Johnson stood in her office on Earth, looking at reports from across the galaxy. She had been Earth's liaison to the HFY Federation for years, always trying to find peaceful solutions to problems. Now she led something called the Terran Alliance, a coalition of over 200 worlds that operated on principles the old Federation had found impossible to understand. The Terran Alliance was built on ideas that seemed crazy to the old galactic order. Every species had an equal voice, regardless of how old their civilization was or how many wars they had won. Resources were shared based on need rather than political power. The strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. Most shocking of all, leadership positions were earned through competence and character rather than inherited through bloodlines or species membership. The transformation was not just political. It was technological and social in ways that amazed everyone involved. Dr. Kevin Torres led research teams where human creativity combined with alien knowledge to achieve breakthroughs that the isolated Federation had never imagined possible. The medical breakthrough that finally cured the Mendari genetic plague came from this new cooperation. For centuries, the plague had slowly killed Mendari children, and their ancient medical science could not find a cure. But when human doctors worked together with Mendari healers, sharing knowledge freely instead of hoarding it, they solved the problem in 6 months. The terraforming technology that could bring dead worlds back to life emerged from human cooperation with the Talari. The Talari understood how ecosystems worked on a deep level that even impressed human biologists. When their knowledge combined with human engineering skills, they created machines that could restore planets like Kepler 442c to their original beauty. Admiral Jack Harrison now commanded the combined fleet of the Terran Alliance. Ships from dozens of different species flew together under human leadership, something that would have been impossible under the old Federation system. The aliens had always believed that different species could not really work together because they were too different from each other. But humans had proven that cooperation was possible when it was based on mutual respect instead of fear and domination. The Talari taught humans about ecological balance. The Geltar crystals shared their mathematical knowledge. The Drakesh warriors trained human soldiers in combat techniques. In return, humans shared their adaptability, their creativity, and their talent for bringing different groups together. The final confrontation came at the Battle of Nexus Prime, the old Federation capital. The battle was not really about military conquest. Humanity could have simply bypassed the capital and let the Federation collapse on its own. But Admiral Harrison wanted to make a statement that the entire galaxy would understand. The remaining Federation fleet gathered around Nexus Prime for what they knew would be their last stand. High Counselor Vethran commanded the defense personally, determined to prove that the old ways were still superior to human leadership. The Federation had assembled every warship they could find, including ancient vessels pulled out of museums and reserve fleets that had not seen combat in centuries. The battle demonstrated how completely human military thinking had evolved beyond Federation understanding. Where the Federation relied on massive ships with overwhelming firepower, humanity deployed swarms of smaller vessels that moved like schools of fish in the ocean. Where Federation tactics were rigid and predictable, human strategies adapted in real time to exploit every weakness their years of observation had revealed. But the most devastating moment of the battle was not military. It was psychological. Captain Steve Brooks, the grandson of the late Dr. Helen Brooks, broadcast a message to every ship in the Federation fleet. The message contained detailed records of every slight, every humiliation, and every act of discrimination that humanity had endured during their 63 years in the Federation. More importantly, the message contained the names in service, records of every Federation officer who had shown kindness to humans during those dark years. Captain Brooks spoke directly to those individuals, thanking them by name for their decency and promising that their kindness would be remembered and rewarded. "We remember everything," Brooks said in a voice that carried clearly across the battlefield. "Every cruelty and every kindness, every insult and every act of friendship. Those who stood with us when we were weak will find themselves honored when we are strong. Those who kicked us when we were down will face justice for their crimes. But those who showed us decency will discover what human gratitude really means." The psychological impact was devastating. Federation forces began surrendering in massive numbers as they realized that humanity did not just have military superiority. They had moral authority. Too many Federation species had their own memories of human diplomats who had helped them during crises, human scientists who had shared knowledge freely, even when cheated, and human traders who had dealt fairly, even when robbed. The surrender of the Federation fleet was not forced by weapons but by conscience. Thousands of alien officers realized that they had been supporting a system that oppressed good people while protecting criminals and bullies. When given the choice between fighting for the old Federation or joining the new alliance, most chose the future over the past. High Counselor Vethran, the architect of humanity's systematic oppression, made one final desperate attempt to rally. Support. He broadcast to the entire galaxy, claiming that humanity's rise proved they had always been a threat that needed to be contained. "We were right to keep them down," he declared from his command ship as human forces surrounded him. "Look at what they have become when freed from proper guidance. They are conquering the galaxy just as we always feared they would." The response came not from human leaders, but from the thousands of species who now fought alongside them. The Telari Elder Council issued a statement that spoke for many former Federation members. "The humans did not become monsters when freed from your oppression," the Elder Council declared. "They became what they always were, a species that judges others by their actions rather than their age or power. You created your own downfall by mistaking patience for weakness and kindness for stupidity." The war did not end with grand battles or dramatic surrenders. It ended with the simple recognition that the old Federation had become obsolete. Species after species formally requested membership in the Terran Alliance, drawn not by fear of human power, but by the promise of equality and justice that humanity offered. When the Valdris Council finally requested a meeting with President Johnson, they expected harsh terms and brutal punishment. Instead, they were offered something that shocked them: full amnesty for past crimes in exchange for genuine cooperation in building a new galactic order. Some Federation hardliners called it weakness, but the galaxy recognized it for what it truly was. It was strength so complete that it could afford to be merciful. Humanity had proven their point so thoroughly that revenge was unnecessary. The old system was dead, and everyone knew it. Commander Lisa Martinez, now Admiral Martinez, stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched the transformation of Nexus Prime. The massive monuments to Valdris supremacy were being carefully dismantled and replaced with memorials to all the species who had suffered under Federation rule. It was symbolic of everything that was changing in galactic civilization. The new monuments did not celebrate the victory of one species over another. They honored the ideals that the Terran Alliance represented: equality, justice, cooperation, and protection for those who could not protect themselves. The inscriptions were written in hundreds of languages, representing every species that had chosen to join the new galactic community. Dr. Patricia Lee, now the head of Alliance Medical Research, stood in her laboratory working alongside scientists from dozens of different worlds. The cooperation that had once seemed impossible was now routine. Species that had been enemies for millennia were working together to solve problems that no single civilization could handle alone. The medical station in the Outer Rim that Karen White had tried to establish years ago was now one of hundreds of joint facilities across the galaxy. The plague that had once killed millions was being systematically eradicated through the combined efforts of species who had learned to trust each other. President Johnson received daily reports of new worlds, asking to join the Terran Alliance. The alliance was growing not through conquest but through example. When oppressed peoples across the galaxy saw what was possible under human leadership, they wanted to be part of it. But perhaps the most important change was in how the galaxy thought about strength and weakness. The old Federation had believed that strength came from dominance and fear. The Terran Alliance proved that real strength came from cooperation and mutual respect. The Drakesh warriors, who had once mocked humans as soft pink things, now served alongside human soldiers.